All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going on a deep dive to investigate one of the most famous villains in all of history, the devil. But to find his real origin story, we're not looking at paintings or poems. Nope, we're going straight to the original texts. And trust me, what we find there might just change how you see this character forever. You know, when you picture the devil, a very specific image probably pops into your head, right? Red suit, horns, pitchfork, the ultimate bad guy. But have you ever stopped to ask where that version of the devil actually came from? Is that really the picture the Bible originally paints? Well, the answer is kind of complicated and honestly pretty surprising. See, in the earliest biblical texts, there isn't one big villain named Satan. Instead, what we find are these different puzzle pieces scattered across centuries, telling a story that evolved over a long, long time. So our investigation starts by looking at the very first piece.
Okay, so let's jump right in. This whole investigation, this entire mystery really hinges on understanding one single, crucial Hebrew word. This is where the story actually begins.
The word is śāṭān. Now we hear that and we instantly think of a name, Satan. But what if I told you that in the original Hebrew, the grammar itself tells a completely different story? And this, right here, is where it gets super fascinating. We've got to stop thinking of Satan as a proper name and start thinking of it more like, well, a job title. And it's the grammar that gives it all away.
So let's look at the evidence. The word śāṭān shows up 27 times in the Hebrew Bible. Now, in the majority of those cases, 17 times to be specific, it has this tiny little prefix in front of it, ha. So it reads ha-śāṭān. That one small addition, it changes everything.
And this is because of a simple but incredibly powerful rule in biblical Hebrew. You just don't put the word the in front of a person's name. You would never ever say the David or the Moses. It just doesn't work grammatically.
So here's the crucial takeaway. Ha-śāṭān is not a name, it's a title. It's a common noun that means the adversary or the accuser. Think of it less like the name Satan and more like the job title, the prosecutor.
And we actually see this role being played out in the text. You know, in the famous story of Job, it's the adversary who shows up in God's divine counsel to act as a kind of prosecuting attorney, questioning Job's goodness. In the book of Zechariah, he's there to accuse the high priest. This isn't rebellion, it's a courtroom function. It's his job. So let that sink in for a second. The figure in the book of Job isn't some rogue enemy of God. He is the adversary, an actual member of God's own heavenly council, doing a job he's supposed to be doing. He's part of the system, not some rebel trying to burn it all down.
But wait, that's only one piece of the puzzle. Because while the heavenly court had its official prosecutor, the Bible also tells another, much darker story, a story about cosmic rebellion.
I mean, this is the next logical question, isn't it? If the adversary is just a job title for a heavenly official, then where in the world did we get the idea of the ultimate cosmic bad guy? Well, it turns out the Hebrew Bible actually gives us two completely distinct characters that only much later get merged into one. On one hand, you have the adversary, the heavenly prosecutor, a member of the divine council. And on the other hand, you have the rebel, a primordial deceiver who gets kicked out of heaven. These are two very, very different profiles.
And this rebel figure is built from a few key stories. It really starts with the serpent back in Genesis, right? The original deceiver who directly opposes God. Then later, we see these echoes of a fall from heaven in places like Isaiah and Ezekiel, where they describe a divine king or even an angelic cherub being cast out for his overwhelming pride.
Now, the punishment for this rebel is always the same, expulsion. He gets cast down to the earth. And in the biblical way of thinking, this is huge, because the earth and the underworld, the realm of the dead, are conceptually linked. So his fall connects him directly to the domain of death.
So you've got these two totally separate streams of thought floating around, the heavenly prosecutor doing his job, and the cosmic rebel who got cast out. So how did they ever fuse into the single figure we all recognize today? Well, this is where we see what you could call the great merger.
This timeline lays it out perfectly. In the early Hebrew Bible, these two concepts are totally distinct. But then, during what's known as the Second Temple period, Jewish writers start to blend them together. The official adversary starts to take on the rebellious, evil traits of the fallen rebel. And by the time we get to the New Testament, that merger is pretty much complete, creating one singular enemy.
To put it really simply, the whole idea's trajectory moves from an office to an identity.
What started out as a function, just a job in the heavenly court, slowly transforms into a singular cosmic enemy.
So, after all that digging, from grammar to cosmic rebellion, what is the final, coherent portrait that the Bible ultimately paints for us? The figure of the devil, as we generally know him, is a synthesis, a mashup. He inherits the courtroom job of the accuser, but he also inherits the pride, the deception, and the fall from the primordial rebel. He's really the product of both of these traditions woven together into one.
And across this entire evolution, there are three defining traits that really crystallize and stay constant. First, a deep-seated pride against God. Second, a relentless hostility toward humanity. And third, and this is key, a fundamental connection to the realm of death. You could say this is the devil's core DNA.
And it's really crucial to see this whole development not as a contradiction in the Bible, but as an arc of progressive clarification. The idea was refined over time, building on earlier concepts to paint a fuller, more detailed portrait of evil.
So, the big takeaway is this. The story of the devil is so much bigger than just a courtroom scene or a snake in a garden. At its absolute core, this character is the Bible's way of exploring the origin of evil and its ultimate connection to the problem of death itself. And all of this leaves us with one final, really powerful thought to consider. If this figure's power, his entire domain, is fundamentally rooted in death, then what does the defeat of death ultimately mean for the defeat of the devil? That's a profound question that lies right at the very heart of the biblical story.